Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. I think I will bring something to your mission that in the long run is probably as valuable as anything I can imagine. My interest is in a place in Italy. It's called the Casentino, but before I go there, I want to start with three premises that are going to run around through my various remarks. Beauty is what we see. More beautiful is what we understand. Most beautiful is what we do not comprehend. This is an epigram that was written back in the 17th century by an Italian. Well, he was a Dane before he became an Italian, and he was an anatomist, in fact, one of the greatest anatomists in Europe in the 17th century. And as you know, or may know, there were a lot of them. This guy was on top. This is the guy who discovered actually that the human heart is just a muscle. No different from the heart of a horse that he was anatomizing at the same time. And he realized that the muscle structure was exactly the same. And after discovering things like this, he also became the father of modern geology. He discovered stratification, the principle of stratification. And stratification is something that has a lot to do with what I'm going to talk about tonight, because it has to do with the creation of a place in Tuscany that is absolutely unusual and unique. It's an enclosed valley. There are not too many of those. Most of them are, kind of haphazard. But this is different. And I'll read you some responses to that from geologists. But for right now, these kinds of beauty, or these effects of beauty, are some things I'd ask you to just hold in your mind. Now, I'm not going to present something that leads to a conclusion. Rather, I'm going to present some things that I hope will sort of rattle your cage. I've given some texts, and I'm going to refer to these. I'm not going to read you through all of them, but there are some things I am going to ask you to read, because we are on a journey, and that journey is something that we all will have. Let me go back here. For all of us, the Casentino is marked right here on this map. Many people don't know anything about it. I dare say that Cora and I are the only ones in this room who have been there, or am I wrong? Even the Italian in the room has not gone there. Well, it is only 35K, it's 50K, about 35 miles east of Florence. It's just north, about another 25 miles from Arezzo, as you can see here. And down through this valley of the Casentino is a huge mountain. Right at the top is a huge mountain, Mount Falterona. Mount Falterona is geologically interesting. It's pushed up to a pretty good height. And yet there is a spring that comes out of the upper side of it. And that spring carries the headwaters of the Arno River. The Arno finds a way to go down the valley and goes out onto the plain of Arezzo. But the Arno is pretty fundamental to the old cultures of the valley. It begins with the Etruscans, those kind of shadowy people that we don't know very much about. Some odd people like D.H. Lawrence thought they knew a lot about them, but there's a lot more to it. The Arno was very special to them. They used to sacrifice things, golden little maquettes and images and utensils and so on. And they used to throw these things into what is now called the Lake of the Idols. It's now kind of a tourist trap, but in 1846, a shepherd girl was herding sheep around this little lake up at the top of Mount Falterona, on the sides of Mount Falterona. And she picked up a golden object, and she took it back. And before long, archaeologists from England, France, Germany, and wherever else were swarming the place. They found some 2,000 objects in that little lake. And ever since, it's been called the Lake of the Idols. If you want to see any of them, you'll have to go to the British Museum or to the Louvre or to several other places because they got, well, robbed. These things are artifacts to be sure, but they indicate that the Etruscans felt something about this valley that was unusual. And there is indeed something unusual about it. And that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. It's a beautiful place. This is from the top of the valley looking south toward Arezzo. It's about 25 to about 28 miles from where I am standing here to the farthest mountains down here, which are above Arezzo. And there are actually 7 or 8 tributary valleys that mark this place. And throughout all of these valleys, you have some of what I would consider the most beautiful scenery in the world. I've been to a lot of places, and I know there are a lot of places that are, somebody thinks they're more beautiful, but this is pretty stunning. I know Mariana is quibbling with that already. Well, I'm going to get to where you're from pretty soon. I've got something for you. This castle down here goes back to about 1130. Not morning, but AD. It is a castle of the Guidi counts, who in Ottonian times, that is after the collapse of the Roman Empire and the collapse of Charlemagne's empire and so on, the Guidi counts, who were from the Ottonian Empire in northern Europe, began to percolate down into this area, and they were the governance. And that was one of their castles. It's a ruin now, but it's a pretty important ruin. It signals a kind of culture that might not have happened had it not been for these people. The Guidi were Christians, of course. They supported the Christianization of Europe that happened. It went on and on through through the millennium, and then on into the 1000s. And it led Rudolphus Glaber, who wrote a book about it then, to characterize this Christianization as the white mantle of churches that was beginning to cover Europe. Well, this white mantle of churches is really kind of the first thing in this story that begins to tell us, there's a lot of poetry here. There's a lot of fact. Actually, there's a lot of geology. And actually, there's a lot of Christian theology. So this is a big mix. It's a huge mix. And you kind of wonder how all of these things can coexist in one place and for one lonely speaker trying to make some sense of all of them. So, let me go on to some things that I wanted to get just right. I have to apologize. This was written this afternoon. And I apologize because there are many versions of this. I've been working on this project for over 25 years. It goes back a long way, and I will explain some of that here. These were following reflections began to form some 25 years ago when the mayor of Castiglione Fiorentino, a lovely hill town in Tuscany, told me, if you want to find the heart of Tuscany, you will need to look in the Casentino. Now, this is a guy that you don't take lightly. He is a humanist, he's a politician, but he's a good one. He's also a scholar, he's also an engineer. I mean, this guy, when he said that to me, I kind of said, where are you coming from? What do you mean, find the heart? Of course, it's in Florence. Nah, not Florence. Well, I did look in the Casentino, and today I still do. For the personal miracle to come from that wisdom and the search that it initiated was my own conversion to the Catholic faith. As for the heart of Tuscany, Giuseppe Alpini was right. For during the years that followed and right into this evening's talk, the miracle of the Casentino has guided the course of my own conversion, which in St. Benedict's terms means a continuing way of life. Conversion is not just, oh, you step over the line and now you're in the good part, and now you're in, oh well, that's where you were. No, for a Benedictine, conversion means you keep going once you make that first step. It's a journey. It's not a moment. For the heart of Tuscany does not pulse in Florence. Rather, it beats strongly throughout a singularly beautiful 250 square mile valley that has been deeply enriched by the lives and acts of a dozen saints, a land whose unforgettable religious geography consists of some 80 places of the faith. Hermitages, monasteries, convents, 2 sanctuaries dedicated to apparitions of the Blessed Mother of God, all in addition to oratorios, chapels, shrines, and a host of little churches tucked away in all those valleys. And what is more, over 40 of these places of the faith hold a veritable treasury of sacred art. Flowers of the faith, where prayer is made visible in perpetuity and the opportunities for contemplation are never restrained. That's important. American art historians don't know anything about that. In fact, when I was teaching in Italy with colleagues from my university over here on the other side of the road, I couldn't get them interested in going to the Casentino. We don't go there. We don't know anything about that. Well, that'll speak for itself. But throughout this valley, the beauties of created nature co-inhere with the beauties of thought, deed, and prayer that are everywhere incarnate in this valley. So much so that one can firmly declare, here, through divine providence, God guided his creation to a very particular perfection that would be developed by saints such as Romulo or Romulus. Okay. He was a martyr, first bishop of Fiesole, whose conversion, according to tradition, was at the hands of St. Peter himself. St. Romuald, who founded the great hermitage and monastery at Camaldoli in 1010, it's still operational. San Gualberto, who founded the monastery, the big monastery at Vallombrosa, in which John Milton is traditionally thought to have held conversations with Galileo. St. Peter Damian, contemplative, abbot, bishop, then cardinal, and author of the famous Vita for Romualdo's cause. St. Francis of Assisi, founder of the Friars Minor and first known stigmatist who, having received that miraculous blessing upon Mount Laverna in 1224, made Mount Laverna in the Casentino one of the most famous holy places in the world. St. Bonaventure, Minister General of the Franciscan Order, Cardinal Bishop of Albano, seraphic doctor, and author of The Soul's Journey into God, which he composed during a long retreat upon Mount Laverna. St. Anthony of Padua, and this is going to be a surprise for the night because I'm going to drop a bomb on that one, who had a special affection for Mount Laverna as a place for withdrawing to satisfy his contemplative yearnings. You know, there is a pilgrim path that leads from Padua to the Casentino and directly to Mount Laverna. And if you go online and look at it, it's just like the Via Francigena, it's just like any other of those. But the people at Padua say this is il primo. This is a pilgrimage. All right. St. Anthony shared Francis' love for the hidden caves. And now I'm going to go through some more pictures. Here's another picture. I want you to keep these things in the back of your mind as we talk, as I talk. This is the view from up on one of the promontories in the Casentino. The valley, the Arno River comes down through here and goes through Stia, and then it winds around and goes through the town that's just below here, and the town that's over here, Poppi. In all of this, I don't want to omit Dante Alighieri. As a guest in exile when he was booted from Florence and told, you can't come back here because if you do, we are going to burn you. He took refuge with the Counts Guidi in the Casentino. He had been there before in the Battle of Campidoldo, but he came back. And at least 21 cantos of the Divine Comedy were written, according to my friends in Dante studies who make a count of things. At least 21 of these cantos were written whilst in the Casentino. Now, it is the voices, the poetry, the wisdom, and the deep spirituality of these remarkable men who blessed this single valley with a profound religious history and an immeasurably rich religious geography that resonates throughout this valley. Yes, this is the miracle of the Casentino and the grounds for calling it the heart of Tuscany. Unless that claim raised doubts, let's look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which I think, Nick, is it on the? It's on the handout, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to read this because this is amazing. Creation did not spring forth complete from the hands of the Creator. Okay, yeah. The universe was created in a state of journeying, in statu viae, toward an ultimate perfection yet to be attained, to which God destined it. We call divine providence the dispositions by which God guides his creation toward this perfection. Well, think about it. Whether one measures creation according to deep time, geologists, or according to the 6 days of the Heptameron, 1 day in the sight of the Lord is as 1,000, and time is a creature like ourselves and not the context of God. This journeying that the Catechism speaks of is actually timeless. Listen then to the way Walter Alvarez, a prominent geologist, I'm going to find this in a moment, writes about how this land was actually made. This is pretty phenomenal. Alpine geology, writes Walter Alvarez, he taught at Berkeley for a number of years, and he writes this in a book which you can take a look at up here on the table if you want to. It's called The Mountains of St. Francis. And The Mountains of St. Francis is a remarkable work by a world-class geologist who has done all the science that one can possibly do, and without being a religious man on paper, obviously understands what's at the root of what he's writing about. So this is one of the things he says. This is just an example. I urge you to buy that book. It's a great read. Alpine geology is so complicated. When plate tectonics replaced continental fixism in the study of geology from the 1960s onward, and made it possible to say that, quote, an ocean can close up if its crust is subducted, bringing its bordering continents toward each other. The Alps are an impressive example of what the Earth can do. Imagine one continent driving over another continent, smearing out, crushing, completely eliminating the ocean floor that once separated them. When you think about the forces that shaped those mountains that we are looking at, it's fascinating to think of that as being journeying. This is not something that was done in a day or 1,000 or 1,000,000, but something that was done, that was shaped, and the Creator shaped it. Now, the part about divine providence gives some people a little bit of trouble. If God created it, it was divine providence that followed the dispositions of what went on in it. And somehow, divine providence saw to it that that litany of saints that I just read you, plus several others, came there, and they founded, and they left their mark. Through divine providence, this uniquely formed valley becomes a veritable laura. A laura is an area in which hermits have their little cottages. You know, being a hermit doesn't mean that you just lock yourself up always. Hermit means that you live alone, but you mingle outside. The monks, they have to stay. They are in choir all the time. They pray. But the hermit, he's got some freedom, but he also has a towering responsibility. It is a place where exterior and interior solitude coexist. Therefore, Casentino, that place, journeys to the perfection for which God destined it, while in the meantime, The language of geological formation lingers in the DNA of the psalmist. Remember how the psalmist writes about mountains skipping like lambs? Well, you probably do you know the book about Noah that's been written by a couple of geologists? I should have brought it. But the Mediterranean was at one point a desert, literally. Dry. Wasn't a speck of water in it. A total desert, the Mediterranean Sea. And they've got some fascinating instances of how they know that through sedimentation and so on. Well, when the dam broke at Gibraltar, it filled up again. And this is the kind of massive change that goes on. The Casentino is a result of all that change. My epiphany of that co-inherence came one afternoon in this tiny church right here, on the verge of an upland meadow near the hamlet called Valliana. The view of the valley from this location is stunning. You've already seen it. And here's this. But the flower of faith that blooms within this church took my breath away. That right there. That painting is probably, it would fit nicely at the end of one of these tables and probably hang over by a foot on either side. We don't know who painted it. We don't know how it got there. But we do know that back in 1970s, the Superintendente of Fine Arts, Belle Arti, in Arezzo notified the parish of Valliana, we are going to have to take your painting in and put it in the museum in Arezzo. It's not safe where it is. That guy lit a bonfire. The people of Casentino were outraged, and they made that outrage known, and the painting was removed and brought back, taken from the museum and brought back here. That tells you how much that painting meant. It's not art. It is part of their lives. And let's look at it for just a moment and you can get some idea why. Christ is standing in a tomb. His mother, dressed as a Servite, in the black robes of a Servite, attends to him. This is the Pietà, except it's different from Michelangelo. Michelangelo has him in her lap. But here, she's standing beside the tomb. You're looking at him over a tomb. Guess what? You're looking at your own end. The locks are sprung. On the back, the cross is predominant. It's covered with the Armi Christi, the implements of insult, degradation, injury. All of these things are hung on the cross as trophies of victory. But there's one feature of this painting that most people, I think, will miss. Do you see anything strange hanging from the cross that doesn't belong with the instruments of the crucifixion? I'll buy a glass of wine for the first person that finds it. No, the reed is there because that was what they struck Christ with. It's this thing right here, right behind St. John's head. Can anybody figure out what it is? Okay, it is the banner of the resurrection, which is a red cross on a white background, but it is shrouded. There's a shroud tied around it. It's covered. We know what it is, but it isn't unfurled. Well, guess what? We suddenly realize this is Holy Saturday. Every day at San Romolo is Holy Saturday, and the people of Valiana pray that. Holy Saturday is the day that Christ is in the tomb, but it's the day that precedes the resurrection. And this painting is an affirmation of the power of the cross. It's a magnificent painting. Now, let me tell you what I found myself doing. I'm inside this little place. It's really no bigger than this room that we're in, the church. And it's up there on the wall, and I'm walking around, and I go to the front door, which is over to my right, and what I see out there is a range of Apennine mountains in a sinking sun. So I've got this layered effect of golden light. So I turn around and I go back and I look at this. And I think about this for a bit. Then I go back to the front door and I think about that for a little bit. What came out of that for me is the co-inherence of natural beauty that you see and a beauty that you can understand as we understand this painting. But both of those point toward a beauty that is greater still, the beauty that we basically cannot comprehend. This is the greatest mystery of our faith. And it's right there in front of us. Here the epigram works again. Beauty is what we see. More beautiful is what we understand. Most beautiful is what we do not comprehend. I realized that moment that I was suspended in body and thought somewhere between see and understand. And at that moment began yearning to immerse myself into what no one can truly comprehend. Transcendent beauties that lie beyond sight, beyond understanding, and beyond merely human comprehension. And that brings us to another one of the elements in your handout. As I was standing up there looking at that, and as I went back on a number of occasions and have thought about it ever since, it occurred to me that this is very much like the passage that you have right here, the excerpt from Psalm 104. Bless the Lord, my soul. You are great indeed. You are clothed with majesty, glory, robed in light as with a cloak. You spread the heavens like a tent. You raised your palace above the waters. You make the clouds your chariot. You travel on the wings of the wind. You make the winds your messengers. Flaming fire, your ministers. I'm not going to read it all. But I do want you to note that there are a couple of passages down here that are marked. They give drink to every beast of the field. Here wild asses quench their thirst. And then down at the very bottom, junipers are the home of the stork. The high mountains are for wild goats and rocky cliffs, a refuge for rabbits. This poem of praise takes the tourist out of you. You stand, you look back and forth, you toggle back and forth from something like that painting and the view that we have from the door where that painting is. This tells you what you're looking at. A guidebook doesn't. Maybe that's why guidebooks don't exist really for the Casentino. Now, years later, I realized that this was a very special moment. And I've put down here St. Romuald's rule. Hint as to where I'm going. This is the kind of thing that awakens contemplation, and we'll get to that with St. Anthony in a few moments. Sit in your cell like in paradise. Now this is the rule for all novices and for all hermits and for all monks at Camaldoli. It's 100 words, and that's all. Throw the entire world behind your back, out of your memory, and take heed of your thoughts, as a good fisherman does of fish. One way is in the Psalms. Do not stray from it. You cannot do all things. You who came with the fervor of a novice, do your best to sing psalms in your spirit and understand them by your mind, now in this place, now in another. If you should begin to wander off while you are reading, do not give up, but hurry to amend it by an understanding. Before all things, place yourself in the presence of God with fear and trembling as one who stands before the face of the emperor. Destroy yourself utterly and sit there like a chick, content with God's mercy. Since if its mother would not feed it, it would not know what to eat, nor have anything to eat. So I found that I was being invited by this experience to go on a journey that I had not gone on before. And now I'm going to ask you to turn to the quotes from Dante's Purgatorio. This is a journey. I'm not going to read this. No, this is too long. We got to eat. But the important thing is that in this canto, Canto 10 of the Purgatorio, he's gone to the base of the hill of Purgatory, and he has not yet gone up the hill, but he is at the very first rising, and the thing that he sees is 3 cameos carved, as the words tell you, in a way that is totally realistic. It's better than any sculptor. It's almost better than nature. But they're carved in this rock wall, and the first one depicts the Annunciation. The second depicts David dancing in wild fervor before the Ark of the Covenant. The third one is Trajan at the moment he stops the whole army in order to give justice to one poor woman. Now, what does this have to do with us in Casentino? This is the model for a way to read the Casentino. Be Dante, be yourself as Dante. Go about it. All of that art is there just as Dante found it at the base of the mountain. But it's there for the same purpose. And that purpose is purgatorial. It takes you somewhere else. It takes you out of yourself. It puts you in that nest for a moment. Now, knowing that, let's move forward. If I can get these pages apart. Come on. I want you to look at the Canticle of Brother Sun. Now, literature people, I'm talking about my colleagues for close to 40 years, a little over 40 years, don't teach this. Guess why? It is verboten because it has to do with things of the spirit, and when you deconstruct or you analyze or you critique this, you're concerning yourself only with accidentals. When it was done, who did it, who paid for it, blah, 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 where it is, how do the manuscripts unfold, blah, blah, blah. Those are all accidentals. Aquinas told us about that. What's the substance? So here, at the expense of, no, you got to eat your soup. I'm gonna keep going here. Let's look at it, because there are a few words in here that are going to slip up on you. Most high, all-powerful, good Lord, yours are the praises, the glory, the honor, and the blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong. No human is worthy. That's important too. No human is worthy to mention your name. That's St. Francis. Praise be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Brother Sun, Sir Brother Sun, who is the day and through whom you give us light. And he is beautiful and radiant with great splendor and bears a likeness to you, Most High One. Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon, Notice, he's not praising anything. The speaker is not praising anything. He's asking that others praise God because humans are not worthy to mention his name. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Wind. Praise be you, Lord, through Sister Water. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire. Praise be you, my Lord, through your sister, Mother Earth. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister bodily death. There's nothing in there to justify calling that a nature poem. It is not a nature poem, and Francis is not a nature poet. Francis has done something that most of us, when we travel, just never think of doing. I never had before I got into this. I'm going to invoke Romano Guardini for a moment, because he talks a bit about how someone helped him, I think it was Shayla, I forget who it was, taught him the importance of having a Catholic worldview. And a Weltanschauung of a Catholic is not to just look at things, but to look at what things are doing. And here's the key to the Canticle of Brother Sun. What is all of that going on in the world? Now, this painting right here, which you have, I asked Nick to give you a copy of it in your handouts so you can go back to it. This is by Giovanni Bellini, a Venetian poet, and Venetians live very close to where St. Anthony lived in Padova. It's one stop on the metro. This painting has been for years at the Frick Museum in New York. Maybe some of you seen it there? Have you gone to the Frick? Well, you should go to the Frick. It's a good place. However, it was bought by Henry Clay Frick back in the 1800s because he wanted to have a landscape to go with his other landscapes. And the people at the Frick and the documents that they will show you are very happy to tell you he wanted that landscape. Okay, it is a stunning landscape. Never seen one quite like that, and no wonder he wanted it. I mean, in those days, he paid the equivalent of several $100 million for it now. And it is the prize painting at the Frick. Some people say it's the best painting in America. Okay, that's true too, but not for the reasons that people give. Do you see any marks of the stigmata on the figure who is standing there? It's called This is called St. Francis in Ecstasy, or St. Francis, one way or another. Anyway, it's called St. Francis. Do you see any sign of the stigmata? No. It would have to be prominent on the chest, right here. It would have to be prominent in the hands, right here. But it's not. Why would St. Francis be depicted by a major Venetian poet-painter and not have the stigmata? I can't imagine. That's like oil and water. So, the other option is the other saint who occupies the Casentino. It's St. Anthony himself. St. Anthony was, well, I think I can read it to you better than I can say it. St. Anthony, if I can find it, had a special affection, this is his biographer, had a special affection for Mount Laverna as a place for withdrawing time to time to satisfy his contemplative yearnings. Anthony shared Francis' love for the hidden caves of this mountaintop where Francis had received the 5 wounds of Christ. Anthony loved praying in one of the little caves on the mountain. In memory of Anthony's visits, the cave has been transformed in recent times into the oratory of St. Francis and is still a popular stop for Laverna visitors today. Well, guess what? This is not of Francis. This is St. Anthony in prayer. And now I want to ask you to look at that painting and notice the clarity and luminosity of it. It's not visionary, it's just pure vision, as only Giovanni Bellini can do it. If you go to the friary in Venice and look at Giovanni Bellini's mother and child on the right altar, you think she's going to walk right out and talk to you. It's amazing. This has a depth, luminosity, and specificity to it that is utterly rare. But is this just a tour de force? No, absolutely not. Because what I believe, and I'm yet working on this for a publication, what I believe is that St. Anthony, at that place, it is a cave, and you can tell that it's a little oratory. He's got a seat there. He's got a little stand for a book, and he is barefooted. Why? The place on which he stands is holy ground. Moses got that message real fast. What is he doing? Well, if you go back to the psalm that I gave you, it talks about the asses that water, the stork that appears. It talks about the little rivulet that comes out right here. It talks about the rabbit that is just below Francis' right hand. This painting is quoting Psalm 104. It is a direct quote. You can't deny it. So what? Well, the quote from the Psalm and the quote of all those details tells you that this is really a kind of painted prayer, and it also tells you that the canticle is at play here because all of these things are praising God, praise through you, through this, through that. The word per, as you know, it has various possibilities of translation. But per here means through. So he's not praising anything. He is putting himself in the context of a light that comes only from acknowledging the praise of God in his creatures. So, that I think is kind of a bombshell. They're not going to like that at the Frick when I write it. But they just published a coffee table book on this painting, which goes into all kinds of details about the accidentals. They even know, you know, the the graphics and the light emanation from different parts of the painting, and you know, it's very technical. And I guess very interesting, but it's all accidental. Finally, I want to take you on a couple of side journeys which illumine all of this in one way or another. The other is from Celano's first life of Francis. Celano writes of the, let me find it here, writes of the stigmata itself. And this may be a little shocking because not too many people think about that. In that time, the sign of nails began to appear in his hands and feet, just like he had seen earlier on the crucified man of the seraph above him. His hands and feet seemed to be pierced in the middle, with the heads of the nails appearing through the inside part of the hands and the upper part of the feet, with their sharpened points sticking out from the opposite side. Indeed, these signs were round in the inside in the hands, but oblong on the outside, and bits of flesh appeared as if the highest part of the nail was bent and struck again. His right side had also been closed by a scar, as it pierced by a lance and often discharged blood. The stigmata are not an exterior to interior thing. They are an interior experience manifest out through the epidermis of a man. That is an eyewitness account by Thomas of Celano, who was there. And it's corroborated in a couple of other places as well. Not many people were able to see it or allowed to see it. So, where are the beauties of things that are incomprehensible? They're right here in this painting, many of them. And I want to, at the final stroke of all this, and then I'm going to eat my dinner. This is from Michelangelo. It's about painting. In an interview with a painter named de Hollanda, who was from Portugal, Michelangelo speaks of what he considers to be the most important kind of painting. The imitation, and this is on that last page, I think, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, last page. Painting, Michelangelo began. Go down about 3 lines. The imitation of some single thing amongst those which immortal God made with great care and knowledge, and which he invented and painted. Like a master, and on downwards, whether animals or birds, can't read it, dispersing perfection according to each thing, the excellent and divine painting which is most like and best imitates any work of immortal God. And that is from the greatest artist that the Renaissance could produce. And that artist, by the way, drank his first water out of Casentino water because his father was the sindaco of a little town up on the ridge of the Casentino. So, what I've tried to do then is tease you. I haven't solved anything. I don't think I've resolved anything, except telling you that this is not St. Francis. But that in itself may be a little shocking. St. Anthony is the star. But St. Anthony in his, you know, he is the only saint whose tongue has been preserved in the chapel at Padua, the Basilica. His tongue, its natural color, preserved there in the chapel. This man who had the voice that moved everyone who ever heard him, he knows what he's looking at, and he is the perfect vehicle for the light, the inner light. There it is. So that's it.